Hey there, sleepy biologists. Before we get into today's curious question, what's the real reason we yawn? I want to know something fun from you. Where in the world are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments. I love seeing how far our little science community stretches across the globe. Now, get comfy, maybe grab a blanket, and let's unravel one of the most contagious mysteries in biology. Yawning is one of those things we all do, every single day, and yet we almost never stop to think about it. It's as natural as blinking, stretching, or sighing. You might yawn when you first wake up in the morning, when you're sitting through a boring lecture, or when you're trying not to fall asleep during a long meeting. Sometimes you don't even notice it happening. Other times you try to stifle it, like when you're in public and you don't want people to think you're bored or rude. But despite how common it is, yawning is still one of the great little mysteries of biology. What's fascinating is just how universal yawning really is. It's not unique to humans. Dogs yawn, cats yawn, birds yawn, even fish yawn, or at least they do something that looks a lot like it. It's a behavior that cuts across species, environments, and evolutionary timelines. You'd think something so widespread must have a clear and obvious purpose, right? And yet, scientists still don't fully agree on why we do it. The first time most of us become aware of yawning is actually before we're even born. That's right, fetuses in the womb have been observed yawning on ultrasounds. And not just once or twice. It's a repeating behavior which suggests it's not just a random twitch or facial spasm, but something deeply embedded in our biology. So from the very beginning of life, yawning seems to be hardwired into us. That raises the question, if it's that fundamental, then surely it must serve a function. You've probably heard the old idea that yawning is about getting more oxygen to the brain. It makes intuitive sense. When you're sleepy, your breathing slows down, your body relaxes, and maybe your brain needs a little extra boost. So you open your mouth, take in a deep breath, and voila, instant refresh. But as we'll explore later, that theory, while popular, doesn't quite hold up under scientific scrutiny. What makes yawning even more curious is how we treat it socially. In many cultures, yawning in public is considered impolite. People might interpret it as a sign that you're not paying attention, or that you're bored or disinterested. In some situations, you might feel the need to cover your mouth or suppress a yawn entirely. But what if yawning isn't a sign of boredom at all? What if it's something more complex? Something connected to brain function, attention, or even empathy. There's also that weird moment when you yawn, and then someone next to you yawns, and then someone else yawns. Before you know it, the whole room is in this quiet chain reaction of open mouths and deep breaths. Why is that? Why is yawning contagious? We'll dive deep into that later too. But for now, it's worth noting that no one really understands why seeing, hearing, or even thinking about yawning can make someone else do it. And here's a little experiment. As you're listening or watching this video right now, have you yawned yet? Just talking about yawning is often enough to trigger it. It's that suggestible. If you haven't yawned yet, give it a minute. Your brain is probably already on the edge of doing it. Yawning also seems to be tied to transitions, those in-between moments in your daily rhythm, like shifting from sleep to wakefulness, or from being alert to winding down. It's like the body's way of hitting reset, preparing itself for a change in mental state. You might notice you yawn when you're switching tasks or shifting environments. Maybe you're about to start a workout, or you're getting ready to relax for the evening. Yawning fits naturally into those transitional spaces. And yet, Despite all our yawns, millions over a lifetime, if you count them, we don't often stop to ask the obvious. Why? Why this gesture, this open-mouthed inhale that we instinctively perform and socially recognize but can't fully explain? So here we are. You yawn, I yawn, animals yawn, babies yawn, entire stadiums full of people yawn. And even with all our technology, brain scans, sleep studies, and behavioral science, the true function of yawning remains elusive. Is it a physical reflex, a psychological reset, a social signal, maybe a bit of all three, or maybe something we haven't even discovered yet? Yawning is a riddle hiding in plain sight, and the more you look into it, the more it draws you in, quietly, almost sleepily, until you realize it might be one of the most curious behaviors in the animal kingdom. Something so simple, yet strangely profound, and we're only just beginning to uncover what it might be trying to tell us. When you feel a yawn coming on, there's this strange mix of awareness and inevitability. Your jaw starts to loosen. Your mouth begins to open, wide and slow, almost involuntarily. Your eyes might squint a little. Your head might tilt back. Your arms might stretch out to the sides. And then comes that deep, drawn-out inhale, slow, filling your lungs with air, followed by a gentle exhale that seems to release more than just breath. It's like your whole body resets itself for a moment. But what's actually happening inside your body during all of that? At the most basic level, a yawn is a coordinated sequence of muscular and neurological actions. It begins in the brain, most likely in a cluster of neurons in the hypothalamus, which is one of the oldest, most primitive parts of our brain. This region helps regulate everything from temperature and hunger to alertness and sleep. It's deeply connected to our circadian rhythms and our overall arousal state, which makes it a prime candidate for triggering yawns. Once the yawn reflex is initiated, a cascade begins. Signals are sent through the brainstem and down through the cranial nerves, telling the muscles in your face, neck, and diaphragm to prepare. The masseter muscles in your jaw contract and pull your mouth wide open. At the same time, your larynx, your voice box, drops slightly and your soft palate lifts, creating a larger passage for air to move through your mouth and throat. Then, your diaphragm, the large dome-shaped muscle at the base of your lungs, contracts. This causes a deep inhalation of air, usually slower and more forceful than your regular breathing. The air fills your lungs completely, possibly even stretching them beyond the usual resting volume, kind of like a deep, spontaneous breath. At this point, you might also notice other parts of your body reacting. Your eyes might water slightly due to tension in the muscles around your eyes. Your shoulders might lift a little. Your eardrums might even shift slightly due to pressure changes in the middle ear. Some people experience a popping or muffled sound in their ears during a big yawn. This is likely from the eustachian tubes adjusting to the pressure, just like when you're in an airplane during takeoff. Then comes the exhale, gentler than the inhale, but often accompanied by a subtle vocalization, a sigh, or that soft ah sound. And after that, a slight sense of calm, or alertness, or just stillness. A brief moment where the body seems to pause and reboot. But here's where it gets interesting. For such a simple movement, the effects of yawning ripple across many systems. Your heart rate might briefly increase, your blood pressure might shift slightly, and your brain may become a little more alert. Some researchers believe this quick shift helps the brain wake up or re-engage, especially when you're transitioning between drowsiness and attention. There's also evidence that brain temperature plays a role. Some studies using thermographic imaging have shown that yawning cools the brain. The idea is that the deep inhalation draws in cooler air through the nasal and oral cavities, and this helps reduce brain temperature, like a built-in radiator. When your brain is overheated, it may not function optimally. A yawn might be a way for the body to quickly restore ideal brain temperature and maintain mental clarity. It's kind of brilliant, really. Your body is regulating itself without you even being aware. Neurotransmitters may also be involved. Dopamine, for example, seems to be connected to yawning. When dopamine levels rise, whether due to mood, anticipation, or changes in arousal, you're more likely to yawn. This might explain why we yawn when we're feeling relaxed, sleepy, or even emotionally overloaded. Yawning has also been linked to serotonin, oxytocin, and nitric oxide, all chemicals that affect brain and body regulation in some way. It's worth noting that yawning can be triggered by pharmacological changes too. Some medications, especially those that affect serotonin or dopamine pathways, like antidepressants, can increase yawning frequency. This suggests yawning is not just physical. It's chemically sensitive and neurologically reactive. In fact, some neurologists even use yawning as a diagnostic tool. Excessive yawning can be a sign of certain neurological conditions or brainstem dysfunctions. So while it seems like a trivial habit, yawning actually provides valuable clues about brain health. Another fascinating layer is how the act of stretching often accompanies a yawn. The term for this combined behavior is pandiculation. It's that full body stretch you might do upon waking, arms out, spine arched, yawn in full swing. It's not just for comfort. It actually helps activate muscle tone and signal the body to shift from a state of rest to readiness. Animals do it all the time. Dogs stretch forward with their paws extended and jaws yawning wide. Cats do their slow, luxurious body-length stretches before they begin to move. It's a universal sign that the body is resetting for alertness or transition. So while a yawn may look like just a big inhale, it's really more like a miniature systems check. It engages the respiratory system, the muscular system, the circulatory system, the nervous system, and even the brain's temperature control mechanisms. And all of it is coordinated in a way that's automatic and deeply rooted in our biology. And yet, even with all this complexity, yawning remains a bit of a riddle. The how is increasingly well understood, but the why is still open to interpretation. Still, the next time you yawn, you can know this. You're not just breathing in air. You're cooling your brain, fine-tuning your muscles, adjusting your alertness, and participating in a behavior that's been part of our species, and many others, for millions of years. Kind of makes you appreciate that sleepy little reflex, doesn't it? For a long time, people thought the answer to why we yawn was actually pretty simple. We're just not getting enough oxygen. That was the classic explanation. Maybe you've even heard it in school. The idea goes like this. When you're tired, your breathing becomes slower and shallower. This supposedly causes carbon dioxide to build up in your blood and oxygen levels to drop. In response, your body sends a signal to yawn, which allows you to take in a deep breath, boost your oxygen intake, and get rid of that excess carbon dioxide. It sounds logical, even intuitive. You're low on air, so your body opens wide, and takes in more. But here's the thing. Science has mostly moved on from this idea. Not because it's a bad theory, but because when researchers started testing it, the data didn't back it up. In the 1980s and 90s, several experiments put the oxygen theory under the microscope, literally and figuratively, and what they found was surprising. In one study, researchers exposed people to different levels of oxygen and carbon dioxide in the air while observing how often they yawned. If the old theory were true, then people breathing low oxygen or high carbon dioxide air should yawn more, right? But that didn't happen. In fact, the number of yawns didn't significantly increase or decrease based on oxygen or CO2 levels. Some people yawned more, some yawned less, but overall, there was no clear pattern that supported the theory. Even when participants were placed in oxygen-rich environments, they still yawned. And people in low-oxygen environments didn't necessarily yawn more. It just didn't match the expectations. That discovery threw a wrench into the whole oxygen idea. If yawning isn't simply a response to needing more oxygen, then what is it really for? Even more telling were the experiments that involved participants breathing through devices that completely controlled the gas mixture they inhaled. Oxygen-rich air, carbon dioxide-heavy air, even pure oxygen. No consistent yawning response showed up. In some cases, people yawned less when breathing carbon dioxide-rich air, which directly contradicted the original assumption. So, the data forced researchers to reconsider. Still, the oxygen theory hasn't completely disappeared. It lingers, partly because it's easy to understand and has that makes sense on the surface appeal. If you ask the average person why people yawn, they'll probably still mention oxygen. It's deeply embedded in popular knowledge. But biologically, it just doesn't hold up as the primary explanation. Now, this doesn't mean that breathing and yawning are totally unrelated. They're absolutely linked in terms of physical movement. Yawning does involve a deep inhalation, and that deep breath does bring in more air than your typical breath. But what that extra air does, and why it's being brought in, appears to be less about gas exchange and more about brain regulation, temperature control, or neurological resets. In fact, some scientists now think that the oxygen idea may have been a kind of scientific red herring, an early explanation that seemed to fit, but actually distracted us from looking deeper. It's a reminder that in science, even plausible theories need to be tested, and that sometimes the simplest answer isn't the correct one. It's also interesting to consider how this theory shaped our behavior. Think about all the times people have used yawning as a way to suggest someone is sleepy or not paying attention. Teachers might assume a yawning student needs to breathe more or focus better. In reality, that student might be cold, might be transitioning between attention states, or might be picking up on someone else's yawn in the room. The oxygen theory became so embedded in our assumptions that it shaped how we viewed tiredness, boredom, even manners. And there's another thing. If yawning was purely about oxygen levels, why would it be contagious? Why would seeing someone yawn, or even hearing the word yawn, make your body want to do the same? There's no drop in your oxygen level when you read the word yawn on a screen. And yet, maybe you just felt one coming on, didn't you? That's not oxygen. That's something else entirely. Something social, psychological, or neurological. What we're left with is a compelling example of how science evolves. A neat theory like the oxygen idea can dominate for decades, until it's tested and replaced by something more nuanced. Yawning, it turns out, isn't about a quick breath fix. It's more likely a complex interaction of brain chemistry, thermoregulation, and social signaling. And yet, the oxygen explanation is still a part of our cultural understanding, like an old story we keep telling, even after we've learned there's a better version. So the next time someone yawns around you and jokes, "Guess I needed more oxygen," you'll know the truth. They probably didn't. Their brain might have been too warm, or they were transitioning between focus and rest. Or maybe they just saw you yawn. Whatever the reason, it's not about air. It's about biology doing something far more subtle and far more interesting than we ever gave it credit for. When you think about your brain, you probably don't think of it as something that needs to cool down like a laptop overheating or a car engine idling too long. But in reality, your brain is a high-performance machine that's always on, always processing, always generating heat. It only makes up about 2% of your body weight, but it uses up roughly 20% of your body's energy. That energy use produces heat, not a fiery blaze, but enough warmth that if it isn't regulated, it can start to impact how well your brain functions. And that's where yawning might come in. Over the last couple of decades, a growing number of researchers have started to think that yawning may actually play a role in cooling the brain, like a built-in air conditioning system, triggered when your neural circuits start running a little hot. The idea is elegant. The deep inhalation during a yawn brings in cooler ambient air, while the wide opening of your jaw increases blood flow to the skull, allowing excess heat to dissipate more effectively. All of this could result in just enough of a drop in brain temperature to restore optimal cognitive performance, especially when you're tired, stressed, or drifting into that foggy zone between alertness and fatigue. The theory of brain thermoregulation has been supported by several fascinating studies. One of the more compelling pieces of evidence comes from thermal imaging, essentially using infrared cameras to detect heat signatures on the body. In one experiment, scientists observed the facial temperatures of subjects before, during, and after yawning. What they found was striking. The temperature in the area around the eyes and forehead dropped slightly after each yawn. It was a small difference, but a consistent one. And in biology, small differences often mean something important. Other experiments looked at environmental temperature and how it affected yawning frequency. The results showed that people and animals tend to yawn more in a specific range of ambient temperature. Not when it's too hot, and not when it's very cold, but when the temperature is warm enough to slightly elevate brain heat, yet cool enough that inhaling air could actually bring the temperature down. It's kind of a Goldilocks zone for yawning. When it's too hot outside, yawning doesn't help as much because the air isn't cool enough to lower internal temperatures. When it's too cold, there's no need to cool down. But in that middle range, yawning seems to show up more, just when the brain might need that little cooling boost. You can even try this for yourself. Next time you feel a yawn coming on, try pressing a cool compress against your forehead or breathing in through your nose in a room with air conditioning. Some researchers have found that just cooling the skin around your head or breathing cool air through your nose can reduce the urge to yawn. Why? Because it's likely accomplishing the same goal, lowering brain temperature, but in a different way. If that job is already being done, your body may not need to yawn. Another piece of evidence comes from animal research. Birds, for example, yawn more frequently in warm environments than in cold ones, even when oxygen levels are kept constant. Rats, too, show increased yawning in conditions that slightly elevate their brain temperature. In fact, When researchers artificially raise brain temperature in animals by even just a degree or two, yawning often follows. This suggests a feedback loop. The brain detects it's getting too warm, and so it triggers a yawn to help cool itself down. The result? A brief restoration of thermal balance, and maybe a slightly clearer mind. This theory also helps explain why yawning shows up during moments of mental transition, like when you're waking up, trying to stay awake, or even just switching from one focus to another. These are moments when brain activity, and thus brain heat, can fluctuate. If your cognitive load increases, your brain gets warmer, and when your brain gets warmer, your mental sharpness can dip slightly. So in theory, the yawn is a natural automatic adjustment, a reset button that helps fine-tune your internal thermostat, so your brain stays in that sweet spot for focus and function. It might also explain why yawns can make us feel more alert afterward. You know that subtle clarity that sometimes comes after a good yawn? That slight feeling of refreshment? That's possibly your brain thanking you for the thermal tune-up. It's subtle, but real. And unlike the old oxygen theory, the brain cooling idea holds up under a wider range of conditions. It accounts for why yawning isn't just about being tired, and why it can happen during stress, boredom, or high concentration. In all of those scenarios, your brain might be heating up, not in a way that would harm you, but in a way that could affect performance. A yawn could be your brain's quiet way of keeping things steady, maintaining homeostasis without ever asking your permission. It also adds a new dimension to contagious yawning. If your brain is responding to visual cues about someone else's yawn and triggering one in yourself, maybe that's a way of preparing your brain to stay alert in a shared social environment, almost like a group-level regulation of attention and readiness. In a social animal like a human, synchronizing mental states could have survival benefits, and cooling the brain just enough to sharpen perception might have helped our ancestors stay aware of predators, changing environments, or emotional signals from others. Of course, more research is still needed. This theory isn't universally accepted, and not everyone agrees on the mechanisms or the evolutionary function. But among the newer explanations for yawning, brain cooling has gathered some of the strongest experimental support so far. It paints yawning as less of a lazy, sleepy habit, and more of an intelligent, self-regulating behavior, one that's evolved over time to help your brain do what it does best. Think clearly, respond quickly, and stay balanced. So the next time someone tells you yawning means you're tired or bored, you'll know there's more to the story. You might not be bored at all. Your brain might just be too warm, and your body, without you even realizing it, is helping to cool it down. Quietly, efficiently, with one big, slow, stretchy yawn. Yawning, by itself, is fascinating enough. But what makes it truly mysterious is how incredibly contagious it is. It might be one of the most involuntary things humans do in response to something we see. Even just the suggestion of it. You've probably experienced this. Someone across the room yawns, and suddenly you're yawning too, even if you weren't tired. Or maybe you're watching a video of someone yawning, or just reading about yawning. And there it is again, that creeping sensation in your jaw, the pull in your chest, the slow, deep breath that seems to come from nowhere. Why does that happen? Contagious yawning doesn't just happen by accident. It appears to follow its own rules, its own rhythm, and even its own social logic. Scientists have been puzzling over this for decades. After all, Most of our reflexes are purely functional. They serve a direct biological purpose for the individual. But contagious yawning seems to be different. It's not just a reflex. It's a reaction to a shared behavior. It doesn't start with something inside you. It starts with something you observe. What's especially interesting is that not all yawns are contagious. Spontaneous yawns, the kind that happen when you're waking up, bored or sleepy, happen without external input. They seem to serve physiological functions like cooling the brain or regulating state transitions. But contagious yawns, those are triggered socially. You see or hear someone else yawn, and then your brain somehow mirrors the behavior. It's almost automatic, but it's not random. One of the first clues that yawning might be linked to social behavior came from studies that found contagious yawning doesn't happen in babies. Infants yawn spontaneously, just like adults, but they don't catch yawns from others until they're about 4 or 5 years old. This suggests that contagious yawning isn't a basic reflex like blinking or breathing. It's something more advanced, something that depends on brain development, especially the parts of the brain involved in empathy and social connection. That idea gained more support from neuroimaging studies. When people observe others yawning, and especially when they catch the yawn themselves, certain areas of the brain light up. These areas include the posterior cingulate cortex, the precuneus, and parts of the medial prefrontal cortex, regions associated with self-awareness, social cognition, and what psychologists call theory of mind, our ability to imagine what someone else is thinking or feeling. In short, contagious yawning appears to be linked to empathy, and it's not just a human thing. In fact, many social animals experience contagious yawning too. Dogs, for example, will often yawn when their owners do, especially if they have a strong bond. Chimpanzees and bonobos, our closest evolutionary relatives, also catch yawns from each other. Interestingly, they're more likely to catch a yawn from a close companion than from a stranger. That detail supports the empathy hypothesis. The more emotionally connected you are to someone, the more likely you are to mirror their internal state, even if that mirroring shows up as something as subtle as a yawn. Even among humans, yawning isn't equally contagious across the board. You're more likely to catch a yawn from a friend, family member, or someone you emotionally relate to than from a stranger. That's not just anecdotal. Studies have tracked this effect across age groups and cultural contexts. The closer your social bond, the more powerful the contagious effect. This means yawning might be a form of non-verbal communication, a quiet, subconscious way of synchronizing behavior within a group. Think about what happens when you're in a quiet room and one person yawns. Soon, someone else does. Then another. Within minutes, it's spread across the space like a soft wave. It's not noisy or disruptive. It's subtle, almost invisible. But what if that wave of yawns is doing something useful? Some researchers believe that contagious yawning may help coordinate group alertness. In animals, this might mean that when one member of the group starts to feel tired or less vigilant, the others pick up on it. Literally. The yawn spreads, subtly raising awareness that it might be time to rest, switch watch duty, or be alert to environmental changes. In humans, it could serve a similar purpose. Even if we don't notice it, we might be calibrating our attention levels through these shared behaviors. The mirror neuron system may also be part of the picture. Mirror neurons are special types of brain cells that fire both when you do something and when you observe someone else doing it. They're thought to play a key role in learning, imitation, and empathy. While the science around mirror neurons is still evolving, some researchers suspect that these neurons help explain why we mimic actions like yawning so easily. When you see someone yawn, your mirror neuron system might simulate the action in your own brain, which then triggers the physical behavior, the yawn itself. It's almost like your brain is rehearsing what it sees and then accidentally goes through with it. But even here, not everyone is equally susceptible. Some people hardly ever catch yawns, while others are highly sensitive. Interestingly, studies have shown that people on the autism spectrum, who often experience differences in social processing and empathy, tend to catch fewer yawns. That doesn't mean they're incapable of empathy, but it might indicate a different way of processing social signals, like facial expressions and body language. Once again, it shows that contagious yawning is deeply tied to how we connect with others. It also raises the possibility that contagious yawning isn't just a curiosity. It might be a kind of evolutionary relic. Imagine early humans sitting around a campfire. One person starts to yawn, signaling a shift in attention or fatigue. The others, seeing that, start to yawn too. Maybe it helps synchronize the group's circadian rhythms. Maybe it's a subtle way of saying, "We're all winding down now." Or maybe it was a way of showing trust, letting down your guard, relaxing your body, knowing that others were doing the same. In a world where non-verbal cues meant survival, something as quiet and universal as a yawn might have meant more than we realize. And then there's the really strange part. Contagious yawning doesn't require physical presence. You can catch it from videos, photos, or even written descriptions. Just the idea of yawning, when presented in the right way, can be enough to trigger one. That suggests your brain doesn't even need to consciously recognize a yawn for the effect to take place. It happens beneath the surface, in the same subconscious spaces where reflexes, emotions, and instincts live. So, while it may seem silly that reading or hearing the word yawn can make you actually do it, it's actually evidence of how powerfully your brain connects thought, behavior, and empathy. It means that even the suggestion of a human action can ripple through your nervous system and manifest as something physical. That's not laziness. That's not boredom. That's connection. In the end, contagious yawning isn't just a weird social trick or an internet meme. It's a deeply human phenomenon, rooted in our biology, shaped by our social lives, and reflective of how interconnected we really are. When you yawn because someone else does, your body is echoing theirs, mirroring their state, syncing your rhythms, joining in a quiet, universal behavior that has crossed time, species, and cultures. And in that way, maybe yawning says something profound about us, that even in our most mundane moments, we are built to respond to each other, to feel with each other, and without a word, to understand. It might seem counterintuitive at first, but yawning isn't just something that happens when we're tired or bored. In fact, some of the most curious and revealing yawns occur during moments of extreme tension or anxiety. Picture a soldier waiting in a helicopter just before deployment, or an athlete on the sidelines moments before stepping onto the field, or even a student sitting in the front row of an exam room, heartbeat racing, palms sweaty, but oddly yawning. It's not fatigue. It's something else. And it might be your body's way of managing stress. This kind of yawning, yawning under pressure, has puzzled observers for a long time. We tend to associate yawning with relaxation or disengagement. But in these high-stakes scenarios, yawns appear when adrenaline is rising, not falling. That has led scientists and psychologists to reconsider what a yawn actually does. Maybe it's not about shutting down. Maybe it's about staying steady, helping us regulate our inner state when the world outside is anything but calm. When you're under stress, your sympathetic nervous system kicks in. That's the system responsible for the fight or flight response. It floods your body with stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, sharpens your senses, accelerates your heart rate, and prepares you for action. But this response can sometimes be too much, especially in situations where you're not actually running or fighting, but still feeling overwhelmed. That's where yawning might play a surprising role. Some researchers suggest that yawning is a kind of physiological reset, a way for your body to downregulate just enough to keep things in balance. When your internal temperature rises, whether from mental overload, emotional intensity, or sheer physiological stress, a yawn may help cool the brain, steady the breath, and regulate arousal. It's like your nervous system tapping the brakes, preventing you from going too far into fight or flight mode. Instead of letting stress spiral, the yawn pulls you back to baseline. And there's support for this in both psychology and physiology. During times of acute stress, your body tends to conserve resources by minimizing unnecessary functions. Yet yawning often persists. In fact, in some cases, it increases. That tells us it may be performing an essential task. It's not a glitch. It's a feature. In one observational study, skydivers were found to yawn more frequently just before jumps. These weren't bored or sleepy individuals. They were moments away from leaping into open air from thousands of feet above the ground. The yawns came not from exhaustion, but from the sheer build-up of internal pressure. It's as if the body, sensing a moment of extreme mental and emotional load, initiated the yawn as a form of release, an outlet that doesn't involve screaming or running or shutting down, but instead brings breath, oxygen, and calm. Another example can be seen in public speaking. Many people, no matter how well prepared, experience a spike in nerves before stepping onto a stage. Dry mouth, shallow breathing, clammy hands. But among those symptoms, many also report spontaneous yawns. Not just one, but sometimes multiple. These yawns, though easily mistaken for disinterest or tiredness, may actually be the body's way of preparing for vocal control, resetting breathing rhythm, and lowering internal arousal levels. Even among animals, yawning can occur during socially stressful moments. In primates, like chimpanzees and baboons, yawns have been observed during tense group interactions, moments where dominance, submission, or conflict are in play. Some ethologists believe these yawns may serve as tension regulators, a way for animals to self-soothe, de-escalate conflict, or signal transitional emotional states. It's not that they're disengaging. On the contrary, they're highly engaged, but needing to maintain control. One idea gaining traction is that yawning is part of your body's parasympathetic counter-response. This is the rest and digest system that balances out the fight or flight mechanism. A yawn, with its deep inhalation and extended exhale, mimics the kind of breathing that promotes calm. It draws air deeply into the lungs, increases oxygenation and lengthens the exhale, all of which are known to lower heart rate and shift the nervous system back toward parasympathetic dominance. It's almost like an instinctive form of breathwork, except it's automatic. You don't have to think about it. Your body does it for you. It also connects to the idea of interoception, the ability to sense what's happening inside your body. People who are more in tune with their internal state might experience more yawning during stress, not because they're weaker or more anxious, but because their nervous system is finely tuned to balance itself. In that sense, yawning becomes a kind of stress biofeedback loop. Your brain reads signals from the body, realizes arousal is too high, and triggers the yawn to correct it. Some military trainers have even started teaching soldiers to use controlled yawning as a technique for nervous system regulation. The idea is that if you can deliberately activate this reflex, you might gain better control over your breathing, attention, and emotional state. It's not unlike box breathing or meditation, but with the added bonus of being hardwired, and it's subtle. No one sees you yawn and thinks you're meditating. But the effect may be similar. What's especially compelling is how socially misunderstood this kind of yawning still is. In modern life, yawning is often perceived as rude or disrespectful, especially in public, formal, or high-stakes settings. Yawn during a meeting, and someone may assume you're bored. Yawn during a speech, and people might think you don't care. But if we understood the true complexity of yawning during stress, we might reframe those assumptions entirely. The person yawning before their big moment isn't being lazy. They're subconsciously preparing themselves. Centering, calming, resetting. This deeper role of yawning as an emotional regulator adds another layer to our understanding of what yawns really mean. They're not just about tiredness, not just about boredom. They're about balance. The body, feeling stress rise, reaches for a tool it's had since birth. A simple stretch of the jaw, a deep inhalation, a long exhale. And through that, it finds a moment of equilibrium. So the next time you find yourself yawning before something important, an exam, a job interview, a first date, don't fight it. Don't apologize for it. Recognize it as your body's quiet way of preparing you. It's your nervous system smoothing the edges, steadying your mind, helping you stay present in the face of pressure. A natural, biological gift that comes just when you need it most. When you think of cooling your body down, you probably imagine sweating or drinking cold water. You might picture shade, wind, or even a refreshing breeze on your skin. But the brain, tucked safely inside your skull, has no such direct access to external relief. And yet, it too must maintain a narrow and highly regulated temperature range to function properly. A few degrees too warm, and cognitive performance begins to slip. Reaction time slows, memory gets fuzzier, focus becomes harder to maintain. The brain, in many ways, is like a high-performance engine, and just like an engine, it needs a built-in cooling system. Surprisingly, yawning might be part of that system. It's easy to assume yawning is about oxygen. That's been the popular explanation for decades. The idea that we yawn because we're not getting enough air has been repeated in classrooms and casual conversations around the world. But as it turns out, this theory doesn't hold up under scientific scrutiny. Multiple studies have shown that increasing or decreasing oxygen and carbon dioxide levels doesn't significantly affect yawning frequency. In other words, yawning isn't about breathing in more oxygen. It's about something else entirely. That something else is temperature. specifically brain temperature. The brain is one of the most metabolically active organs in the body, constantly firing electrical signals, managing hormonal responses, regulating internal systems, and processing an enormous amount of information from the environment. All of this activity generates heat, and when the brain becomes even slightly overheated, its ability to perform at peak efficiency begins to decline. So where does yawning come into play? A growing number of researchers believe that yawning helps regulate brain temperature. When you yawn, you open your mouth wide and take in a deep, slow breath of air. This action causes a rush of cool, ambient air to pass over the tongue and upper respiratory tract, which are rich in blood vessels. As the air enters the mouth and sinuses, it cools the blood in the surrounding tissues. That blood, in turn, circulates toward the brain, helping to reduce its internal temperature. It's like turning on a tiny built-in air conditioner for your mind. But that's only part of the story. Yawning isn't just about airflow. It also involves a powerful stretch of the jaw, face, and neck muscles. This muscular action has mechanical effects on the circulatory and lymphatic systems. The stretching and contracting of the jaw increases blood flow to the skull, pushing warm blood out of the brain and encouraging cooler blood to flow in. This exchange can help dissipate heat more efficiently, preventing the brain from overheating during periods of sustained cognitive effort or environmental stress. Experimental studies have tested this idea in creative ways. In one experiment, participants were exposed to warm and cool ambient temperatures while being shown videos designed to trigger yawning. The results were compelling. People yawned more frequently in moderate temperatures and less when the air around them was either too cold or too hot. In extreme cold, there's no need for additional cooling. In extreme heat, yawning doesn't help much because the surrounding air isn't cool enough to lower brain temperature. But in that sweet spot, where the outside air can provide a meaningful thermal benefit, yawning becomes more frequent. This pattern supports the idea that yawning is thermoregulatory, not just social or emotional. Another interesting line of evidence comes from animal studies. Birds, reptiles, and mammals have all been observed yawning, and in many of these cases, the behavior increases when the animal is under thermal stress. For example, certain species of birds yawn more when exposed to rising temperatures. This yawning is not related to sleep or social cues. It's a direct, physiological response to heat. These findings suggest that yawning may be a shared evolutionary mechanism among vertebrates for keeping the brain within a stable thermal range. Even the timing of yawns throughout the day fits this pattern. People tend to yawn more frequently at transitional moments, when waking up, when getting tired, or when switching between mental states. These are all times when the brain is either ramping up or winding down its activity levels, both of which can cause temperature fluctuations. A yawn at these times may help stabilize the shift, cooling the brain just enough to keep it functioning smoothly as it changes gears. It's worth noting that this brain cooling theory doesn't cancel out other explanations for yawning. It expands them. Yawning might still serve social and communicative functions. It might still help regulate arousal, attention, or emotional tension. But beneath all of those layered meanings, there could be a basic, ancient function: thermal regulation. The body, sensing the brain is heating up, initiates a sequence that pulls in air, stretches key muscles, and rebalances the temperature, quietly, effectively, and often without us even noticing. This understanding reframes yawning in a profound way. No longer just a sign of boredom or fatigue, it becomes an elegant tool of homeostasis, one of the body's ways of fine-tuning its most sensitive and essential organ. It also suggests that certain lifestyle habits could influence yawning frequency. For instance, prolonged screen use, lack of hydration, and mental fatigue can all contribute to rising brain temperature, potentially triggering more yawns. Conversely, cool environments, fresh air, and breaks from intense concentration might reduce the need for yawning, not because we're less tired, but because the brain is better ventilated and thermally regulated. In essence, yawning might be a biological air vent, one that opens at just the right moment, letting in a breath of coolness when our brain needs it most. It's not random. It's not trivial. It's a hidden act of self-preservation, tucked inside a behavior we've always taken for granted. And the next time you feel a yawn creeping in, you might pause for a moment and realize your brain just asked for a breeze. Yawning is one of those curious behaviors that seems so simple on the surface, but reveals layers of complexity the more you look into it. While many think of yawning as just a physiological reflex or a sign of tiredness, its relationship to our sleep-wake cycle is profound and intricate. The connection between yawning and sleep is woven into the very fabric of our daily rhythms, guided by the body's internal clock, the circadian rhythm, and other underlying biological processes that govern alertness, rest, and rejuvenation. From the moment we wake up in the morning to the instant we drift off to sleep at night, our bodies follow a finely tuned schedule. This internal clock, housed deep within the brain's hypothalamus, orchestrates cycles of hormone release, body temperature fluctuations, and even cognitive alertness. Yawning plays an important role in this dance. It often appears as a natural transition signal, marking the shifts between sleep and wakefulness, or between different stages of alertness throughout the day. When you wake up, you might notice a big, satisfying yawn. This isn't just a random reaction to getting out of bed. Instead, it serves as a physiological reset, helping your brain cool down after the warmth of sleep, reoxygenating your blood, and jump-starting your nervous system into a state of wakefulness. It's a subtle but powerful way to transition from the restful state of sleep to the more alert, engaged state of being awake. This morning yawn can be seen as the body's way of shaking off the last remnants of sleep inertia, the grogginess and slowed processing that come with awakening. Similarly, yawning tends to increase again as the day wears on and we approach bedtime. This increase isn't just about being tired from the day's activities. Instead, yawning serves as a biological marker, signaling the brain's preparation for rest. As melatonin, the hormone that regulates sleep onset, begins to rise, yawning frequency also tends to climb. This can be seen as part of the brain's way of cooling and calming itself, helping to slow mental activity and prepare the body for the restorative processes of sleep. It's a gentle nudge, a whisper from your nervous system that it's time to start winding down. Throughout the day, even during moments of brief rest or inactivity, yawning might serve as a mini reset, helping to maintain alertness or prepare the brain for shifts in activity. This is why you might find yourself yawning during monotonous tasks or dull meetings, even if you aren't necessarily sleepy. The brain, detecting a drop in stimulation or a creeping sense of fatigue, uses yawning as a mechanism to re-engage and recalibrate. In fact, yawning's close link to the sleep-wake cycle can be seen in how it varies with disorders that disrupt normal rhythms. People suffering from insomnia, for instance, often report altered yawning patterns, either fewer yawns due to heightened arousal or excessive yawning caused by fragmented sleep. Similarly, individuals with narcolepsy or other sleep disorders might experience yawns at unusual times or with greater intensity. This suggests that yawning is not only tied to normal sleep patterns, but is also sensitive to disruptions in the delicate balance of rest and activity. Scientists have also found that certain neurotransmitters and brain chemicals involved in sleep regulation, such as dopamine, serotonin, and hypocretin, also influence yawning. These chemicals help modulate our mood, alertness, and sleepiness, and their interplay appears closely linked to when and how often we yawn. For example, dopamine levels tend to rise in the morning to promote wakefulness and decrease in the evening to encourage sleep, paralleling the times when yawns become more or less frequent. There's even evidence that yawning can promote transitions between different sleep stages. During non-REM sleep, the brain cycles through phases of deeper and lighter sleep. Yawning may act as a way to gently shift from one phase to another, helping maintain the fluidity of the sleep process. While much of this is still under investigation, it hints at yawning's subtle but vital role in maintaining the quality and structure of our nightly rest. All of this points to yawning as much more than a simple sign of being tired. It's a critical part of how our bodies manage the balance between sleep and wakefulness. It helps the brain move gracefully through different states, signaling when it's time to rise and shine, or to relax and recharge. This understanding can help us be kinder to ourselves the next time we yawn in the middle of a meeting or right before a big presentation. Rather than interpreting it as boredom or distraction, we can recognize it as our brain's natural, evolved way of managing its energy, temperature, and focus, working hard to keep us alert when we need to be, and gently preparing us for rest when it's time. So, next time you notice yourself yawning at the start or end of your day, or even during those quiet moments in between, remember that it's your body's way of tuning itself in sync with the rhythms of life. It's a subtle but powerful reminder of the cycles that sustain us and the deep connections between yawning, sleep, and the intricate dance of consciousness itself. Yawning is often seen as a simple, almost mindless behavior, but when we take a closer look at it, yawning reveals a fascinating web of social and communicative functions deeply rooted in our biology and psychology. From the earliest moments of human development to complex social interactions in adulthood, yawning acts as more than just a physical reflex. It serves as a subtle, yet powerful form of nonverbal communication that influences social bonding, group dynamics, and emotional contagion. One of the most intriguing aspects of yawning is its contagious nature. If you've ever caught yourself yawning after seeing someone else yawn, whether in person or even through a video, you've experienced this phenomenon firsthand. Contagious yawning isn't just a quirky oddity. It's a widespread behavior observed in humans and even some animals like chimpanzees, dogs, and certain bird species. This suggests that contagious yawning is not a random occurrence, but rather a biologically ingrained social tool. Scientists believe that contagious yawning is linked to empathy and social bonding. When we see someone else yawn and feel the urge to yawn ourselves, it reflects our brain's ability to mirror the emotional and physiological states of others, a phenomenon known as emotional contagion. This mirroring helps us understand and connect with those around us. In social animals like humans, this is crucial for maintaining group cohesion and cooperation. The shared experience of yawning might serve as a subtle way to synchronize group members' alertness levels, helping the group function more effectively as a unit. From an evolutionary perspective, Yawning likely played an important role in early human communities. Imagine a group of early humans preparing for a hunt or resting together after a long day. Contagious yawning could help signal collective tiredness or alertness, coordinating the group's behavior without the need for words. If one member starts to feel sleepy or needs a break, a yawn could ripple through the group, prompting others to recognize the need for rest or heightened awareness. In this way, yawning acts as an unspoken form of communication, supporting social harmony and survival. Interestingly, the social significance of yawning is nuanced and context-dependent. In some cultures, yawning openly in social settings is seen as rude or disrespectful, while in others, it's accepted as a natural response. This cultural overlay adds a layer of complexity to yawning's social role. People learn early on to suppress yawns during formal occasions or in the presence of authority figures, which suggests that yawning is not just a biological reflex, but also subject to social norms and etiquette. Beyond its role in social bonding, yawning also functions as a subtle emotional signal. It can indicate boredom, stress, anxiety, or even a desire to disengage from a situation without causing offense. For example, in a tense meeting or uncomfortable conversation, someone's yawn might signal a need for a pause or a change in topic. Because yawning is generally perceived as less confrontational than verbal complaints or visible expressions of frustration, it can act as a socially acceptable way to express internal states and manage group dynamics. Neuroscience offers insight into why yawning is so tightly linked with social cognition. Areas of the brain involved in understanding others' feelings, intentions, and mental states, such as the mirror neuron system and the anterior cingulate cortex, also become active during yawning. These brain regions facilitate empathy and social connection, further supporting the idea that yawning is embedded in our social brain circuitry. Moreover, yawning can be an early indicator of social disorders. Studies have found that individuals with autism spectrum disorder, ASD, or schizophrenia often show differences in contagious yawning, possibly due to impairments in empathy or social processing. This has led researchers to explore yawning as a potential tool for understanding and diagnosing social cognitive conditions. In animal behavior research, yawning also serves communicative functions. Primates use yawns to display dominance or submission in social hierarchies, while dogs might yawn to signal appeasement or reduce tension during interactions with humans or other dogs. These behaviors underscore yawning's role in nonverbal communication across species and highlight its evolutionary importance. Overall, yawning acts as a complex social signal woven into the fabric of human interaction. It helps us connect, synchronize, and navigate the social world in ways we often don't consciously realize. Far from being a mere sign of fatigue, yawning is a rich, multifaceted behavior that bridges biology, psychology, and social communication, reflecting the deep interdependence of humans as social creatures. So, the next time you find yourself yawning during a conversation or notice it spreading around a room, remember that you're participating in a subtle social dance, one that has evolved over millennia to keep us connected, understood, and in sync with those around us. It's a reminder that even the simplest actions can carry profound meaning in the intricate web of human relationships. Yawning is a behavior so universal that nearly every person, no matter their culture or background, experiences it. Yet despite its commonness, yawning is still surrounded by a layer of mystery. especially when it comes to understanding the physiological changes it triggers inside our bodies. When you yawn, a remarkable series of events unfolds, involving multiple body systems working together in a coordinated fashion. These changes affect your breathing, heart rate, brain activity, and even your state of alertness, revealing yawning as much more than just a simple reflex. The most obvious change during a yawn is in your breathing pattern. A typical yawn begins with a deep, slow inhalation that fills the lungs almost completely, followed by a brief pause and then a slow exhalation. This deep breath contrasts sharply with our usual, more shallow breathing. By drawing in a large volume of air, yawning helps to increase the amount of oxygen entering the bloodstream while also aiding the removal of carbon dioxide. Although earlier theories suggested yawning's primary role was to boost oxygen intake, later research has refined this idea, indicating that the oxygen-boosting effect may be secondary or even incidental. Nonetheless, the change in breathing rhythm itself has important consequences, helping to regulate respiratory function and maintain balance in blood gases. Beyond respiration, yawning triggers significant cardiovascular responses. During a yawn, the deep inhalation and subsequent muscle contractions in the chest and diaphragm can cause subtle changes in heart rate and blood pressure. The act of yawning stretches the lungs and opens up the airways, which can momentarily affect the vagus nerve, a key player in controlling heart rate. As a result, you might notice your heart rate temporarily slows down just after yawning, a phenomenon known as vagal tone modulation. This interaction between yawning and the autonomic nervous system hints at yawning's broader role in helping regulate the body's internal state, balancing excitation and relaxation. Simultaneously, the muscular components of yawning involve a large array of muscles beyond just the jaw. When you yawn, you stretch the muscles of your face, neck, and sometimes even your shoulders. This stretching may help relieve tension in these muscle groups and improve blood flow to the head and neck. The action also stimulates the release of neurochemicals such as dopamine and nitric oxide, which have various effects on mood, alertness, and vascular dilation. Nitric oxide, in particular, helps widen blood vessels, potentially aiding in brain cooling and enhancing oxygen delivery. Yawning also has notable effects on brain activity and mental state. Functional imaging studies reveal that certain areas of the brain become more active during yawning, including regions associated with arousal, attention, and autonomic control. This brain activation aligns with the common experience of yawning during transitions between states, such as moving from drowsiness to alertness or vice versa. Essentially, yawning acts like a neural reset button, momentarily boosting brain function and sharpening cognitive focus. It can increase the electrical activity in the cerebral cortex and improve the efficiency of neural circuits, helping you feel more awake and ready to engage. Interestingly, the duration and intensity of yawns vary widely among individuals and situations, reflecting differences in physiological needs and environmental factors. Some yawns are brief and subtle, barely noticeable to others, while others are long and dramatic, involving prolonged inhalations and exaggerated facial movements. These variations suggest that yawning's physiological impact can be modulated according to the body's current state, with stronger yawns possibly providing greater stimulation and relief. Moreover, Yawning influences other physiological systems indirectly. For instance, the deep breath associated with yawning can affect the balance of gases in the sinuses and middle ear, occasionally causing a popping sensation as pressure equalizes. The act of yawning can also stimulate tear glands, leading to watery eyes and influence saliva production. These accompanying effects hint at the interconnected nature of yawning within the body's complex network of reflexes and regulatory mechanisms. Finally, yawning's physiological effects have practical implications for everyday life. The increase in oxygenation and the boost in brain function can help mitigate the effects of fatigue during long periods of mental or physical exertion. The muscle stretching can relieve stiffness after sitting or inactivity, improving circulation and flexibility. The calming influence on heart rate and autonomic balance may also play a role in reducing stress and promoting a sense of well-being. In sum, yawning triggers a multifaceted cascade of physiological changes that go far beyond the simple act of opening your mouth wide. It orchestrates breathing adjustments, modulates cardiovascular function, activates brain regions involved in alertness, and engages muscles in a stretching ritual, all working together to help maintain balance and optimize the body's internal environment. Understanding these changes deepens our appreciation for yawning as a complex, adaptive behavior finely tuned to support health and cognitive function in everyday life. Yawning is often thought of as a solitary, somewhat involuntary action, but one of the most fascinating aspects of yawning is how it seems to ripple through groups of people, sparking a contagious wave that spreads seemingly without control. This phenomenon, known as contagious yawning, reveals a great deal about human social connection, empathy, and the brain's ability to mirror the actions and emotions of others. But why exactly does yawning spread from person to person? And what does this say about our nature as social beings? Contagious yawning is a curious and universal behavior observed in humans across cultures, as well as in some non-human animals like chimpanzees, bonobos, dogs, and even certain birds. The basic scenario is familiar. You see someone yawn, and almost instinctively, you feel the urge to yawn yourself. This response can be so strong that it's difficult to resist, suggesting that yawning is more than just a random reflex. It's a deeply ingrained social mechanism. One of the leading theories about why yawns are contagious centers on empathy. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another, and contagious yawning seems to be tightly linked to this social emotional capacity. Studies have shown that people who score higher on tests of empathy or social sensitivity are more prone to contagious yawning. Conversely, individuals with conditions that affect social processing, such as autism spectrum disorder or schizophrenia, tend to show reduced or absent contagious yawning. This correlation suggests that yawning contagion could serve as a window into how we connect with others on an emotional level. At the neurological level, contagious yawning involves brain areas responsible for social cognition and mirror neurons, specialized brain cells that activate both when we perform an action and when we see someone else perform the same action. These mirror neurons help us imitate and understand the actions and intentions of others, forming the basis for empathy and social learning. When you see someone yawn, your mirror neuron system fires up, triggering a cascade of brain activity that primes you to yawn as well. This not only explains the automatic nature of contagious yawning, but also highlights its role in fostering social bonds. From an evolutionary perspective, Contagious yawning may have offered advantages by helping groups synchronize their behavior and physiological states. Imagine a group of early humans on a long journey or during a hunting expedition. If one individual starts to feel tired or less alert, their yawn could trigger a chain reaction, signaling to others that it's time to rest, increase vigilance, or adjust activity levels. This collective synchronization would enhance group cohesion and survival by aligning the energy states of its members. Interestingly, contagious yawning also reveals how subtle and nonverbal communication shapes human interactions. Unlike spoken language, which requires conscious effort and is often subject to social rules, contagious yawning operates beneath conscious awareness. It's an automatic, unconscious form of communication that crosses cultural and linguistic boundaries, illustrating the fundamental biological roots of social connection. There are also intriguing variations in contagious yawning based on context and relationship. For example, people are more likely to catch yawns from close friends and family members than from strangers or acquaintances. This selective contagion suggests that yawning is not only about mirroring, but also about social relevance. Our brains prioritize syncing with those we care about or identify with more strongly. This selective contagion reinforces social bonds within trusted groups and helps maintain social hierarchies. Moreover, contagious yawning can be influenced by factors such as fatigue, attention, and emotional state. When people are tired or less engaged, they may be more susceptible to catching yawns, whereas when fully alert or distracted, they might resist the urge. Emotional states like stress or anxiety can also modulate contagious yawning, highlighting how intertwined it is with broader psychological processes. Interestingly, contagious yawning is not limited to humans. Research has documented similar behaviors in some non-human primates, which show increased yawning after observing others yawn. Dogs, too, appear to catch yawns from their human companions, especially if they have a strong bond, pointing to the possibility that contagious yawning transcends species boundaries and reflects a basic biological mechanism for social bonding. Despite all these insights, contagious yawning still holds mysteries. For example, the exact triggers and brain circuits involved remain under investigation, and not everyone experiences contagious yawning to the same degree. Some people rarely yawn after seeing others do so, while others are highly susceptible. Scientists are exploring genetic, developmental, and environmental factors that influence this variability. In summary, contagious yawning is much more than a quirky habit. It's a window into the social brain. It reflects our capacity for empathy, our need to connect, and the ways our brains and bodies are wired to synchronize with those around us. This simple act of opening your mouth wide and taking a deep breath becomes a bridge between individuals, linking minds and emotions in a subtle dance of shared experience. Next time you find yourself yawning after someone else, remember that it's your brain's way of saying, "I'm with you." It's an ancient, automatic gesture of connection, reminding us that we are deeply social creatures, wired to understand and respond to one another, even without words. Yawning is often thought of as a simple, involuntary reflex, something that just happens when we're tired or bored. But when we look deeper into its underlying causes, it becomes clear that yawning is a complex behavior regulated by intricate brain chemistry and neurobiology. The drive to yawn is influenced by a variety of neurotransmitters and brain systems that regulate arousal, alertness, and social interaction, linking yawning to fundamental processes within the central nervous system. One of the key neurochemical players involved in yawning is dopamine, a neurotransmitter well known for its role in motivation, reward, and motor control. Dopamine pathways in the brain interact with regions that regulate arousal and behavioral activation. Research has shown that increased dopamine activity can trigger yawning. For example, drugs that enhance dopamine transmission, such as certain medications used to treat Parkinson's disease, often induce yawning as a side effect. This connection suggests that dopamine plays a role in the initiation and regulation of yawns, possibly by influencing the brain's state of wakefulness and readiness to engage with the environment. Another important neurochemical involved in yawning is serotonin. This neurotransmitter is widely recognized for its role in mood regulation and sleep cycles. Serotonin influences the activity of brain regions that control the onset of sleep and wakefulness, and its modulation can also affect yawning frequency. Studies have demonstrated that drugs impacting serotonin receptors can either increase or decrease yawning depending on which receptor subtype is targeted. This complexity indicates that serotonin's role in yawning is nuanced, integrating signals related to mood, arousal, and the body's internal clock. Oxytocin, often called the bonding hormone, also plays a fascinating role in yawning. Oxytocin is critical for social bonding, trust, and empathy, and it modulates activity in brain regions responsible for emotional processing. Intriguingly, oxytocin administration has been shown to induce yawning in both humans and animals, further linking yawning to social and emotional states. This connection supports the idea that yawning is not only about physiology, but also about social communication and emotional synchronization. In addition to these neurotransmitters, other neuropeptides and hormones contribute to the regulation of yawning. Hypocretin, also known as orexin, a neuropeptide involved in maintaining wakefulness and regulating energy balance, has been implicated in yawning behavior. Dysfunction in the hypocretin system is associated with sleep disorders such as narcolepsy, which is characterized by excessive yawning and sudden sleep attacks. This highlights the importance of hypocretin in balancing alertness and sleep, and its role in modulating yawns as part of this balance. Endorphins and other endogenous opioids are also thought to influence yawning. These natural painkillers and mood enhancers have calming effects on the nervous system. In some cases, opioid receptor activity has been linked to increased yawning, suggesting that yawning might be related to the brain's reward and relaxation systems, helping to manage stress and promote a sense of well-being. Brain regions involved in the initiation and control of yawning include the hypothalamus, brainstem, and limbic system. The hypothalamus acts as a regulatory hub, coordinating signals related to sleep, temperature, and social behavior. Within the brainstem, specific nuclei, such as the paraventricular nucleus and the reticular formation, are critical for the motor aspects of yawning, activating the muscles needed for the deep inhalation and facial movements. The limbic system, which governs emotions and social behavior, further integrates yawning into the context of social communication and emotional regulation. Pharmacological studies support these neurochemical findings by showing how certain drugs affect yawning frequency. Agonists or antagonists targeting dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and other neurotransmitter systems can either trigger or suppress yawns. These findings have clinical relevance as well. Excessive yawning is sometimes observed as a side effect of medications or as a symptom in neurological conditions, reflecting disruptions in these neurochemical pathways. Environmental factors and individual differences also influence how these neurochemical systems regulate yawning. Stress, fatigue, social context, and even genetics can modulate neurotransmitter levels, affecting the frequency and contagiousness of yawns. For instance, heightened stress can alter dopamine and serotonin signaling, potentially increasing yawning as a coping or regulatory mechanism. In summary, yawning is a behavior deeply embedded in the brain's neurochemical circuitry. Far from being a simple reflex, it is orchestrated by a complex interplay of neurotransmitters and brain regions that regulate arousal, social interaction, and physiological balance. Understanding these underlying mechanisms not only sheds light on why we yawn, but also reveals how yawning connects to broader aspects of human biology and social behavior. This insight enhances our appreciation of yawning as a multifaceted phenomenon, reflecting the intricate dance of chemistry and neural activity that shapes our daily lives. Yawning is one of those curious behaviors that everyone has experienced, yet it carries a surprising number of myths and misconceptions that have persisted throughout history. These myths often stem from trying to explain a behavior that, on the surface, seems so simple and obvious, but in reality involves complex physiological, neurological, and social factors. Understanding and debunking these common myths not only clarifies what yawning really is, but also helps highlight the fascinating science behind it. A pervasive myth is that yawning is always a sign of boredom or tiredness. While yawning frequently occurs when we're sleepy or disengaged, it is not exclusively tied to those states. Yawning can happen during periods of heightened alertness, or even in situations where a person is actively concentrating. In fact, yawning often serves to increase arousal and mental readiness rather than simply signaling fatigue. The idea that yawning means boredom is an oversimplification that ignores its broader physiological and social roles. Another common misconception is that yawning functions primarily to increase oxygen levels in the blood. This explanation, popularized in many textbooks and casual conversations, suggests that yawning is the body's way of bringing in more oxygen and getting rid of carbon dioxide. However, scientific studies have shown that altering oxygen or carbon dioxide levels in the blood does not consistently affect yawning frequency. This evidence challenges the oxygen hypothesis and points researchers toward alternative explanations, such as brain cooling or neural arousal regulation. Some people believe that yawning is contagious only among humans, but this is not true. Contagious yawning has been documented in several animal species, including primates like chimpanzees and bonobos, as well as dogs and some birds. This fact dispels the myth that contagious yawning is a uniquely human social phenomenon and instead suggests that it may have evolutionary roots shared across species that rely on social cohesion. There is also a myth that yawning can spread simply through suggestion or thinking about yawning, but this is only partly accurate. While imagining yawning or seeing images or videos of yawns can trigger the urge to yawn, it generally requires a certain level of social or emotional connection to be highly contagious. For example, people tend to yawn more after seeing someone they know yawn than after seeing a stranger yawn on screen. This nuance contradicts the idea that yawning is purely mechanical or reflexive and reinforces its social dimensions. Some cultures have superstitions surrounding yawning that add to the mystique and misunderstanding. In certain traditions, yawning is thought to allow evil spirits to enter the body or represent a sign of bad luck. Others believe that covering your mouth while yawning is necessary to prevent disrespect or to avoid letting your soul escape. While these beliefs vary widely and are culturally specific, they illustrate how yawning has been imbued with symbolic meanings far beyond its biological function. Another misconception involves the belief that suppressing a yawn is harmful or dangerous. Many people worry that holding back a yawn might cause problems like ruptured eardrums or other injuries. Although yawning does help equalize pressure in the middle ear, there is no scientific evidence that suppressing yawns causes physical harm. While it may feel uncomfortable to stifle a yawn, it is generally safe to do so. Some myths also incorrectly attribute yawning to psychological traits or personality types, suggesting, for example, that people who yawn frequently are lazy or disinterested. These stereotypes are unfounded and ignore the physiological and neurological underpinnings of yawning. Yawning is a natural, involuntary process that everyone experiences, regardless of personality or motivation. Lastly, there is a myth that animals yawn for the same reasons as humans, such as boredom or tiredness. While some animal yawns may relate to similar states, yawning in animals often serves additional functions tied to communication, stress regulation, and social signaling. Attributing human motivations to animal yawns oversimplifies the complex behaviors seen across species. By dispelling these myths, we gain a clearer understanding of yawning as a multi-dimensional behavior shaped by biology, neurology, social interaction, and culture. Recognizing the scientific facts behind yawning allows us to appreciate this everyday action in a new light, revealing it as a sophisticated and meaningful part of human and animal life, rather than just a boring or tired gesture. This deeper insight invites us to approach yawning with curiosity and respect for the intricate systems it reflects. Yawning is often linked to our body's need to regulate temperature, and one of the most intriguing scientific theories about why we yawn focuses on its role in cooling the brain. Unlike many explanations that center on oxygen intake or boredom, this brain-cooling hypothesis provides a compelling and biologically plausible reason for yawning that aligns with what we know about brain physiology and thermal regulation. The human brain, despite making up only about 2% of our body weight, consumes a disproportionately large amount of energy and produces a significant amount of heat. Maintaining an optimal temperature is crucial for the brain's proper functioning, because even slight increases in brain temperature can impair neural efficiency, cognitive performance, and overall mental alertness. The body employs several mechanisms to dissipate excess heat from the brain, such as blood flow adjustments, sweating, and changes in breathing. Yawning appears to be another such mechanism, serving as a way to cool the brain rapidly and effectively. When you yawn, you take a deep inhalation of cool air through your open mouth, and this action promotes increased airflow across the sinus and oral cavities. This influx of cool air helps lower the temperature of blood flowing to the brain. In addition, the muscular contractions during a yawn stretch the jaw, face, and neck, which can enhance blood circulation and facilitate the movement of cooler blood toward the brain. By increasing the flow of cooler blood, yawning helps to dissipate heat generated by ongoing neural activity, thus protecting the brain from overheating. Studies have supported this brain cooling hypothesis through various experiments. For example, researchers have observed that yawning frequency tends to increase in situations where the brain might be at risk of overheating, such as during prolonged mental effort, stress, or exposure to warm environments. Conversely, exposure to cold air or environments that promote brain cooling tends to reduce yawning frequency, suggesting that yawning acts as a physiological response triggered by rising brain temperature. Animal studies also provide compelling evidence for the brain cooling theory. Animals known to yawn, such as primates and dogs, have shown changes in yawning frequency based on ambient temperature and internal body temperature fluctuations. These observations indicate that yawning is not just a human phenomenon, but a broader biological mechanism shared among species for maintaining brain temperature homeostasis. Another important aspect of the brain cooling hypothesis involves the relationship between yawning and alertness. When the brain overheats, neural processing efficiency drops, leading to feelings of fatigue, reduced focus, and slower reaction times. Yawning, by cooling the brain, can reverse these effects and improve cognitive functioning. This explains why yawning often precedes a return to alertness, helping the brain reset and perform optimally after periods of strain or drowsiness. Furthermore, the cooling effect of yawning may also explain why contagious yawning occurs in social groups. When one individual yawns to cool their brain and increase alertness, others may catch the yawn reflexively, helping synchronize the group's cognitive states. This collective cooling could provide an adaptive advantage in group settings, such as hunting or vigilance, where maintaining alertness is critical for survival. Some scientists have also explored how yawning might interact with other cooling mechanisms in the body. For example, yawning often occurs alongside deep breathing, which itself contributes to thermoregulation through the respiratory system. The combination of increased airflow, muscle stretching, and changes in blood flow during yawning creates a multifaceted cooling process that works efficiently to protect the brain. Interestingly, the brain cooling hypothesis helps resolve contradictions posed by earlier theories, such as the oxygen deprivation explanation. While taking a deep breath during yawning does increase oxygen intake, this alone does not fully account for why yawning occurs so frequently in non-oxygen deficient situations. Brain cooling provides a more comprehensive explanation that aligns with observed patterns of yawning in diverse contexts. In summary, yawning plays a critical role in regulating brain temperature, acting as a biological cooling system that maintains optimal neural functioning. By promoting airflow, enhancing blood circulation, and facilitating heat dissipation, yawning helps prevent the cognitive decline associated with overheating. This function supports alertness, mental clarity, and overall brain health, making yawning an essential, adaptive behavior rather than a mere sign of tiredness or boredom. Understanding yawning through the lens of brain cooling not only enriches our knowledge of this everyday behavior, but also highlights the remarkable ways our bodies maintain internal balance and optimize performance. Yawning is a behavior that transcends human culture and species boundaries, and one of the most fascinating aspects of it is how it relates to social bonding and communication. While many people think of yawning as simply a physical reflex linked to tiredness or boredom, Yawning also serves important social functions that help strengthen connections between individuals and groups. This social aspect of yawning reveals a great deal about human nature, empathy, and the evolution of social behaviors. From an evolutionary standpoint, humans are deeply social creatures who rely on cooperation, communication, and emotional attunement to survive and thrive. Social bonding involves more than just words. It includes subtle, non-verbal cues and shared behaviors that promote group cohesion. Yawning, particularly contagious yawning, appears to play a role in this complex social landscape by facilitating synchronization of physiological and emotional states among group members. When one person yawns and another responds by yawning as well, it creates a subtle but powerful link between them. This automatic mimicry signals empathy and shared experience, indicating that individuals are attuned to each other's internal states. This phenomenon is not limited to humans. It is observed in other social animals such as chimpanzees, bonobos, and even dogs, which suggests that contagious yawning is an evolutionary adaptation for promoting social harmony. Contagious yawning functions as a form of non-verbal communication that helps coordinate group behavior. By aligning alertness and readiness levels, yawning can synchronize the energy and attention of multiple individuals, ensuring that the group responds collectively to environmental demands. This collective synchronization would have been particularly important for early human communities during activities that required vigilance, such as hunting or keeping watch for predators. Moreover, yawning may serve as a social signal that conveys subtle messages about one's emotional or physiological state. For example, yawning could indicate fatigue, stress, or boredom in a way that is non-threatening and easy to recognize. This helps others in the group adjust their behavior accordingly, whether by offering support, increasing vigilance, or simply understanding the current mood of the individual. In this way, yawning facilitates empathy and social understanding without the need for explicit communication. Research has also shown that the likelihood of contagious yawning increases with the closeness of the relationship. People are more likely to catch yawns from family members, close friends, or trusted companions than from strangers. This selective contagion suggests that yawning reinforces social bonds where emotional connections are strongest. It may serve as an unconscious way to affirm trust and affiliation, strengthening the ties that bind people together. In addition to empathy and bonding, yawning may also play a role in reducing social tension. In groups, shared behaviors like yawning can create a sense of unity and calm, helping to ease stress and foster cooperation. The physiological effects of yawning, such as increased blood flow and brain cooling, can also help regulate arousal levels, making it easier for individuals to maintain composure in social settings. Interestingly, yawning has been observed to have a contagious effect across species lines, particularly between humans and dogs. Dogs often yawn in response to their human companions' yawns, which highlights the deep bond between the two species. This cross-species contagious yawning further emphasizes the role of yawning as a bridge for social connection, extending beyond human relationships to interspecies interactions. The social importance of yawning also extends to cultural contexts. Different societies have varying beliefs and norms surrounding yawning, such as covering one's mouth out of politeness or superstitions about yawns carrying spiritual significance. These cultural practices underscore how yawning is embedded not just in biology, but also in social rituals and collective meaning. In summary, yawning is much more than a mere physical reflex. It is a powerful social tool that promotes empathy, communication, and group cohesion. Through contagious yawning and its associated signals, individuals connect on an emotional and physiological level, reinforcing social bonds and facilitating cooperation. This social function of yawning illustrates how deeply interconnected our bodies and minds are with the people around us, highlighting yawning as a subtle yet essential element of human social life. Understanding this dimension enriches our appreciation of yawning, revealing it as a behavior that bridges biology and sociality in remarkable ways. Yawning is not only a fascinating biological and social behavior, but also a subject of growing clinical interest because it can sometimes signal underlying health issues. While yawning is a normal and common activity experienced by virtually everyone, excessive yawning or yawning that occurs in unusual contexts may indicate that something is amiss in the body or brain. Medical professionals pay attention to abnormal yawning patterns because they can serve as important clues in diagnosing neurological, psychological, or systemic disorders. One of the key areas where excessive yawning is observed is in neurological disorders. Conditions such as multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's disease, epilepsy, and brain tumors can disrupt the normal functioning of the brain regions and neurotransmitter systems involved in yawning. For example, lesions or damage to the hypothalamus or brainstem, which play central roles in controlling yawning, may lead to abnormal yawning frequency or intensity. In Parkinson's disease, the dopamine system is impaired, which is closely linked to yawning behavior. Some Parkinson's patients experience excessive yawning as a symptom or as a side effect of medications that affect dopamine pathways. Epileptic seizures, particularly those originating in or affecting the temporal lobe and brainstem, may also trigger bouts of excessive yawning. In such cases, yawning might precede or accompany seizure activity, acting as an early warning sign or part of the seizure manifestation. This connection highlights how yawning is deeply embedded in neural circuits that regulate arousal and motor control. Another neurological condition linked to abnormal yawning is migraine. Many people who suffer from migraines report increased yawning before or during an attack. This may be related to changes in brainstem activity or neurotransmitter imbalances during migraine episodes. Understanding yawning patterns in migraine patients can help clinicians better grasp the complex brain changes involved in this painful condition. Sleep disorders are another major category associated with excessive yawning. Narcolepsy, characterized by sudden sleep attacks and disrupted sleep-wake cycles, often includes frequent yawning as a symptom. This disorder involves deficits in hypocretin, orexin, a neuropeptide that regulates wakefulness, which also influences yawning behavior. Similarly, conditions like sleep apnea and chronic fatigue syndrome may lead to increased yawning due to disrupted sleep quality and the body's efforts to maintain alertness. Psychological and psychiatric conditions also show links to yawning abnormalities. Anxiety and depression can alter neurotransmitter systems such as serotonin and dopamine, potentially increasing yawning frequency. In some cases, excessive yawning may be a side effect of psychiatric medications like selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, SSRIs, or antipsychotics, which affect these neurotransmitter systems. Monitoring yawning patterns in patients undergoing treatment can provide insight into medication effects and side effects. Yawning can also be influenced by systemic conditions that affect the body's overall homeostasis. For example, vagus nerve stimulation, which can occur in certain cardiac or gastrointestinal disorders, may increase yawning frequency because the vagus nerve plays a role in autonomic nervous system regulation and yawning initiation. Hypoglycemia, low blood sugar, and certain infections have also been associated with increased yawning, though the mechanisms are less well understood. In clinical practice, abnormal yawning may present as either excessive yawning, occurring very frequently and sometimes uncontrollably, or as yawning at inappropriate or unusual times. Excessive yawning can lead to discomfort, social embarrassment, or even interfere with daily functioning. When patients report such symptoms, healthcare providers often conduct thorough evaluations, including neurological exams, sleep studies, medication reviews, and sometimes brain imaging to identify underlying causes. Therapeutic approaches to abnormal yawning depend on the underlying condition. For instance, treating the primary neurological disorder, adjusting medications, improving sleep quality, or managing psychological factors can help reduce excessive yawning. In some cases, specific interventions targeting neurotransmitter systems may be employed to modulate yawning frequency and improve patient quality of life. The study of yawning in clinical settings also advances our broader understanding of brain function. Since yawning involves multiple neural systems, including motor control, arousal regulation, emotional processing, and social cognition, observing changes in yawning behavior provides a unique window into the complex interplay of brain networks. This makes yawning a valuable phenomenon, not just in diagnosis, but also in research, exploring brain health and disease. In summary, while yawning is a normal, everyday behavior, its abnormal patterns can be important indicators of underlying health issues. Excessive or unusual yawning can signal neurological disorders, sleep disturbances, psychological conditions, or systemic dysfunctions. Recognizing these connections allows clinicians to use yawning as a subtle but significant symptom in assessing patient health. This clinical perspective deepens our appreciation of yawning, revealing it as a behavior that reflects both the normal rhythms and the potential disruptions of the human body and brain. Yawning is not just an isolated reflex. It is deeply intertwined with the body's natural rhythms, particularly the circadian rhythm that governs our sleep-wake cycles and overall biological timing. Understanding how yawning fits into these daily cycles sheds light on its purpose and why it tends to occur at certain predictable times throughout the day. The circadian rhythm is essentially the body's internal clock, a roughly 24-hour cycle that regulates various physiological processes such as hormone release, body temperature, metabolism, and sleep patterns. This rhythm is controlled by a region in the brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, SCN, located in the hypothalamus. The SCN responds primarily to light cues from the environment, helping to synchronize the body's functions with day and night. Yawning is closely linked to this internal timing system. It often occurs at transitional moments in the circadian cycle, such as when waking up in the morning or preparing to sleep at night. These times correspond to shifts in alertness and arousal levels, which are regulated by fluctuations in brain activity and neurochemical signals. Yawning acts as a bridge between these states, helping the body transition smoothly from one phase to another. One reason yawning is common upon waking is that it helps the brain and body ramp up from a state of rest. After several hours of sleep, the brain needs to increase blood flow, oxygen levels, and temperature regulation to become fully alert and functional. Yawning facilitates these physiological changes by promoting increased heart rate, deep inhalation, and muscle stretching, all of which contribute to a more awake and ready state. This morning yawn is often part of the body's natural reboot process, signaling the shift from sleep to wakefulness. Similarly, yawning tends to increase in the evening as the body prepares for sleep. During this time, the body's temperature gradually drops, and the brain transitions toward slower, more restful activity. Yawning may help facilitate this process by cooling the brain and signaling the reduction of alertness. This evening's surge in yawning serves as a cue for the body to start winding down, reinforcing the circadian rhythm's role in promoting healthy sleep patterns. Yawning can also occur at other times aligned with natural dips in alertness, such as mid-afternoon, often called the post-lunch dip. This phenomenon is influenced by circadian factors, as well as the effects of digestion and energy metabolism. When the brain experiences a temporary decrease in arousal during these dips, yawning can help restore alertness by increasing blood flow and oxygenation, effectively counteracting the sluggishness that sometimes occurs. Importantly, disruptions to the circadian rhythm can alter yawning patterns. For example, individuals who work night shifts or experience jet lag often report changes in their yawning frequency and timing. These disruptions confuse the internal clock and create mismatches between environmental cues and physiological processes, leading to irregularities in alertness and rest. In such cases, yawning may become more frequent or occur at unusual times as the body struggles to regulate its internal state. The connection between yawning and circadian rhythm also highlights the role of various neurotransmitters and hormones that fluctuate throughout the day. Chemicals like serotonin, dopamine, and melatonin influence both the sleep-wake cycle and yawning behavior. For instance, melatonin, which rises in the evening to promote sleepiness, may indirectly increase yawning by lowering arousal. Conversely, dopamine, which enhances alertness and motivation, can modulate yawning in ways that reflect the body's current state of wakefulness. Research has shown that yawning patterns can provide insights into an individual's circadian health. Regular and appropriately timed yawning suggests a well-functioning internal clock, while irregular or excessive yawning might indicate circadian disruption or sleep disorders. This makes yawning a useful, though subtle, marker for assessing how well the body is synchronized with its environment. Furthermore, yawning's relationship with circadian rhythm underscores its evolutionary importance. By helping organisms manage transitions between rest and activity, yawning contributes to survival by optimizing alertness at critical times. This function likely provided advantages in early human societies and continues to play a role in our daily functioning. In summary, yawning is intricately connected to the body's circadian rhythm and natural biological cycles. It acts as a physiological signal and mechanism that helps regulate transitions between sleep and wakefulness, maintain alertness during natural dips, and promote overall balance in brain and body function. Understanding yawning within this context reveals it as more than a simple reflex. It is a dynamic behavior aligned with our internal clock, essential for maintaining health and optimal performance throughout the day. Yawning, as a natural and universal behavior, has long intrigued scientists seeking to understand its underlying mechanisms and evolutionary origins. One fascinating perspective is that yawning serves as an evolutionary adaptation, a behavior that has been preserved across countless species because it offers survival advantages. By examining yawning through the lens of evolution, we can appreciate how this seemingly simple act has contributed to the success of animals, including humans, over millions of years. From an evolutionary standpoint, behaviors that persist across species typically serve important functions, either directly related to survival or to social organization. Yawning fits both categories, playing roles in physiological regulation and social communication. The fact that yawning is observed not only in humans, but also in a wide array of animals, from mammals like dogs, chimpanzees, and lions to birds, and even reptiles, suggests that it is a deeply conserved trait that emerged early in the evolutionary tree. One of the key evolutionary functions of yawning is its role in regulating brain temperature and alertness, as previously discussed. In the wild, maintaining optimal brain function is critical for responding to threats, finding food, and navigating complex environments. Yawning helps cool the brain and restore alertness, enabling animals to be more vigilant and responsive when needed. This advantage could mean the difference between escaping a predator or becoming prey, or successfully hunting versus going hungry. The evolutionary origins of yawning likely stem from basic physiological needs that were refined over time. Early vertebrates probably developed yawning-like behaviors as a way to manage internal states, such as oxygen levels, blood flow, or temperature regulation. Over millions of years, natural selection favored individuals who could efficiently manage these internal conditions to maintain alertness and cognitive function, leading to the yawning reflex becoming widespread. Beyond its physiological benefits, yawning evolved to play a crucial role in social bonding and communication. In many social species, coordinating group behavior is vital for survival. Contagious yawning, the phenomenon where yawns spread rapidly among group members, is thought to promote synchronization of vigilance and restfulness within a group. This shared behavior likely enhanced group cohesion, making collective activities such as hunting, foraging, or predator vigilance more effective. Social bonding through yawning also involves empathy and emotional connection, traits that are essential in highly social species like humans and primates. The tendency to catch a yawn from a close companion reflects an ability to understand and mirror others' internal states, strengthening social ties and cooperation. This capacity for empathetic contagion likely provided evolutionary advantages by fostering group harmony and reducing conflicts. Interestingly, the evolutionary significance of yawning can also be seen in its presence across species that differ widely in social structures and habitats. For solitary animals, yawning may primarily serve physiological functions, while in social animals, it carries additional layers of social meaning. This versatility highlights yawning's adaptability and importance in meeting diverse survival challenges. Moreover, yawning might have played a role in nonverbal communication long before the evolution of complex language. In early human ancestors, yawning could signal tiredness, stress, or the need to change activity, helping coordinate group behavior without words. Such signaling would have been crucial in environments where clear communication meant the difference between life and death. The evolutionary perspective also sheds light on why yawning has persisted despite appearing inconvenient or socially awkward at times. Because it confers important survival benefits, such as improving brain function, facilitating social bonding, and enhancing group coordination. Natural selection has maintained yawning as a fundamental behavior. Its deep roots in physiology and social life explain why it is so universal and enduring. Studying yawning in an evolutionary context also inspires questions about how modern lifestyles may affect this ancient behavior. Changes in sleep patterns, social environments, and technology might influence yawning frequency and social contagion, potentially impacting how well yawning performs its adaptive functions today. In conclusion, yawning is far more than a simple reflex. It is an evolutionary adaptation with profound implications for brain function, social interaction, and survival. Its presence across a vast array of species and its dual roles in physiology and communication highlight yawning as a behavior shaped by millions of years of natural selection. Recognizing yawning's evolutionary roots enriches our understanding of this everyday phenomenon and reveals the intricate connections between biology, behavior, and survival. Yawning is a complex behavior that extends beyond just physiology and social bonding. It also plays a significant role in emotional regulation and psychological well-being. Our emotional states are deeply interconnected with physical responses, and yawning is one of the subtle but telling indicators of how our bodies manage stress, anxiety, and emotional shifts. Exploring this connection reveals how yawning functions not only as a biological reflex, but also as a mechanism for maintaining emotional balance and mental health. Emotions such as stress, anxiety, boredom, and fatigue often trigger yawning, and this relationship is more than coincidental. When the brain experiences heightened emotional arousal or tension, it can lead to disruptions in normal neural functioning and neurotransmitter balance. Yawning appears to act as a natural reset button, helping to restore equilibrium by promoting relaxation and reducing physiological arousal. This makes yawning an important coping mechanism for managing the emotional challenges we face daily. For example, during periods of stress or anxiety, the body activates the sympathetic nervous system, which prepares us for a fight or flight response by increasing heart rate, blood pressure, and muscle tension. While this response is vital for survival in immediate danger, prolonged activation can be harmful, leading to chronic stress and emotional exhaustion. Yawning helps counterbalance this heightened state by activating the parasympathetic nervous system, which induces relaxation and calms the body. The deep inhalation and stretching involved in yawning increase oxygen intake and stimulate the vagus nerve, which promotes parasympathetic activity, helping to soothe emotional tension. Boredom and fatigue, often linked to emotional states of disengagement or lack of stimulation, also frequently induce yawning. When the brain is understimulated or fatigued, yawning may serve as a signal to increase alertness and re-engage with the environment. This helps prevent emotional dullness and promotes mental clarity. The act of yawning can momentarily heighten awareness, encouraging individuals to shift their focus or take a break, both of which support emotional well-being. Research in psychology and neuroscience has found correlations between yawning frequency and emotional disorders such as depression and anxiety. In some cases, excessive yawning can be a symptom of underlying psychological distress. For instance, people with anxiety disorders may yawn more often as their bodies attempt to regulate the overactivation of stress responses. Similarly, depressive states characterized by low energy and motivation might involve altered yawning patterns as the body struggles to maintain emotional and physiological balance. Interestingly, yawning is also connected to the release and regulation of neurotransmitters like dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin, which play crucial roles in mood regulation and social bonding. These chemicals influence both our emotional experiences and yawning behavior, highlighting the close link between the two. For example, dopamine, associated with reward and motivation, can modulate yawning frequency, while oxytocin, known as the bonding hormone, may influence contagious yawning and empathetic responses. Contagious yawning, which is strongly linked to empathy and social connection, also ties into emotional regulation. When we see someone else yawn and respond in kind, it reflects a shared emotional state and the capacity to understand and resonate with another's feelings. This empathetic connection can foster emotional support and social comfort, both of which are essential for psychological health. In this way, yawning helps maintain emotional homeostasis, not only within individuals but also across social groups. Furthermore, yawning might act as a non-verbal way to communicate emotional states, signaling tiredness, boredom, or stress to others without words. This subtle communication can influence social interactions and group dynamics, helping individuals navigate emotional contexts more effectively. For example, a person yawning during a tense meeting might unconsciously convey their fatigue or disengagement, prompting others to adjust the situation or pace. In clinical contexts, understanding the relationship between yawning and emotional regulation offers valuable insights. Therapists and healthcare providers may observe yawning patterns as part of assessing a patient's emotional state or response to treatment. In some cases, interventions that improve emotional regulation, such as mindfulness, relaxation techniques, or medication, also normalize yawning frequency, reflecting improved physiological balance. In summary, yawning serves as a vital interface between the body's physiological processes and emotional experiences. It helps regulate stress, alleviate anxiety, combat boredom, and facilitate social empathy, thereby contributing to overall emotional well-being. By promoting balance in the nervous system and enabling non-verbal communication of emotional states, yawning plays a subtle yet significant role in how we maintain psychological health and navigate the complexities of our emotional lives. Understanding yawning in this light deepens our appreciation of it as a natural, adaptive behavior, integral to both mind and body. Yawning is a common and universal behavior, but despite centuries of observation and scientific inquiry, many questions about it remain unanswered. The study of yawning is a dynamic and evolving field, constantly revealing new insights while also presenting new mysteries. Exploring the current state of yawning research highlights the challenges scientists face and the exciting potential for future discoveries that could deepen our understanding of human physiology, neurology, psychology, and social behavior. One of the main challenges in yawning research is the complexity and multifaceted nature of the behavior. Yawning is influenced by a wide array of factors, including neurological processes, physiological states, social cues, emotional conditions, and environmental contexts. This makes it difficult to isolate a single cause or function. For instance, yawning can be triggered by tiredness, boredom, social contagion, brain cooling, or emotional states, all of which may overlap or interact. Disentangling these overlapping influences requires sophisticated experimental designs and interdisciplinary approaches that combine neuroscience, psychology, physiology, and behavioral science. Furthermore, the subjective nature of yawning complicates research. While we can measure frequency, duration, and physiological correlates, the internal triggers and personal experiences associated with yawning are harder to quantify. This is especially true for social and emotional aspects, such as empathy-related contagious yawning, which involve complex cognitive and affective processes. Researchers rely on both observational studies and controlled laboratory experiments, but translating findings across different settings and species remains challenging. Technological advances have begun to open new doors for yawning research. Brain imaging techniques, such as functional MRI and PET scans, allow scientists to observe the brain regions activated during yawning and contagious yawning. These studies have identified areas like the hypothalamus, brainstem, and mirror neuron systems as key players, but much remains to be explored about the precise neural circuits and neurotransmitter dynamics involved. Genetic research is also emerging, with some studies investigating potential hereditary components related to yawning behavior and susceptibility to contagious yawning. Another promising avenue is the study of yawning across different species. Comparative research on mammals, birds, reptiles, and even fish helps trace the evolutionary history of yawning and its conserved functions. Understanding how yawning manifests in animals with different brain structures and social systems provides clues about its fundamental biological purposes. This research also helps clarify which aspects of yawning are universal and which are species-specific adaptations. Clinical research on yawning is also gaining traction. Abnormal yawning patterns have been linked to various neurological and psychiatric conditions, including Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, epilepsy, anxiety disorders, and depression. Investigating these connections may not only improve diagnosis and treatment, but also shed light on the underlying mechanisms of yawning. For example, yawning might serve as an early indicator of neurological dysfunction or as a marker for medication effects. This clinical relevance underscores the practical importance of continued yawning research. Despite the progress made, many core questions remain open. Why exactly does yawning occur with such regularity across different states and species? What is the precise mechanism by which yawning cools the brain? How do social and emotional factors interact with physiological triggers to produce contagious yawning? Why do some individuals rarely experience contagious yawning? And what does this tell us about social cognition and empathy? Answering these questions requires innovative experimental methods, larger and more diverse study populations, and integrative theoretical models. Public interest in yawning research is high, partly because it is a relatable behavior experienced by all humans and many animals. This interest encourages funding and interdisciplinary collaboration, fostering a vibrant research community. Moreover, understanding yawning better has broader implications for health and well-being. Since yawning is connected to sleep regulation, brain function, emotional balance, and social communication, insights gained could inform treatments for sleep disorders, neurological diseases, and mental health conditions. Looking to the future, researchers anticipate that combining data from genetics, neuroimaging, behavioral studies, and clinical trials will provide a more holistic understanding of yawning. Artificial intelligence and machine learning might play a role in analyzing complex data sets to identify patterns and predict yawning behavior under different conditions. Additionally, exploring how modern lifestyle factors, such as screen time, artificial lighting, and social media, affect yawning could reveal important information about human adaptation and health in contemporary environments. In conclusion, the study of yawning remains a rich and evolving field, full of both answers and mysteries. While much has been learned about the physiological, neurological, and social aspects of yawning, many fundamental questions persist. Continued research promises not only to deepen our scientific knowledge, but also to enhance practical applications in medicine and mental health. Yawning, though a simple and often overlooked behavior, offers profound insights into the workings of the brain, body, and social mind, making it a fascinating subject that will continue to captivate scientists and curious minds alike for years to come.